Hello, everybody, and welcome to this very special episode today. We are continuing on what I do every month with Cody House. We talk about a film that's won one of my Fleming winning films, and today we have a not just a brand new contest, not just a brand new collaborator on to this particular podcast, but on my YouTube channel in general. Please let me introduce Bradley Collin Smith. Hello, Colin.
Hey, thanks, Robbie. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. Hello, Cody.
Hey, Robbie, how are you? Colin, how are you?
Great.
Yes, yes. I've been looking forward to this all day because we are talking about one of my all-time favorite movies, Fight Club.
But I mean, how much are we going to talk about? Because we're not supposed to talk about it.
Well, it's a very
You've been waiting all day to say
film.
that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, waiting all day for that joke.
Because we have to break the first two rules because this is a really big movie. Everybody has their own opinion on it. Everybody has their own beliefs on it, and everybody looks at the film different ways. And I'm glad, Toady, that you suggested having Colin on to have a different perspective of this film, since me and you have spoken about this a few times on the Fleming Film Show already.
Well, for sure. And, talking about people having different views and different opinions. I mean, that varies with people who love the movie, too, right? I told you about that famous meme about the joke about each time you watch Fight Club, what it means to you after each viewing.
Yes. Yes. Although it kind of makes sense because after you showed me that, I showed it to one of my other friends and he found this video on Fight Club being part of a queer cinema, and I watched the video and I was really impressed with the interpretation of the film from this video.
So do we want to start with that? Because I'm not at a authority to say that, but is there some queer subtext with the whole, like, his image of what the perfect man should be and it being the image of Brad Pitt?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly sort of my understanding, and my understanding of this film and my experience of this film has evolved since the first time I saw it. I struggled very first time watching it with appreciating it for a number of reasons. Over time as it's aged and different people have engaged with it, and there's been I've read a lot of different stuff about it. Certainly when I approach it now, I definitely look at it through a queer lens in terms of, how the source material, of course, is written by a queer man. And, there's another meme that's going around right now that is, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it basically says something about, I'm going to butcher this, but basically the idea that there's a that the cinematic language around fragile masculinity is often quite similar to images of male power fantasies, and then the joke is that the person watching it says, well, I hope nobody misinterprets this. And one of the films that's referenced in the meme, because they a number of images from things like The Wolf of Wall Street and other films like that, but Brad Pitt's character in Fight Club is part of this meme. And it's certainly, as I watch it now, I definitely see it as a critique of that sort of fragile masculine kind of identity. But it's interesting because it's not always that clear, and I think there's ways of interpreting it. Different people interpret the film in different ways, right?
Yeah, I interpret the big meaning behind it is toxic masculinity. When I first told my boss at my job that this was my favorite movie, his first quest after I explained to him I liked the film, he says, "You do understand the meaning that it's all about toxic masculinity?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Right.
Well, I mean, not to hurt your feelings, Robbie, but David Fincher, the director of this movie, has famously said to women, if your boyfriend's favorite movie is Fight Club, you might want to dump them.
I mean, again, it depends on why you're liking it, right? Like if you can appreciate the critique aspect of it. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, I still think it's pretty clear. And I mean, I still had this feeling even the first time I watched it that, you know, that Brad Pitt's character is not supposed to be idealized. Like I think the film is tearing down this idealization that the narrator has for this image, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean he's a bad guy in a way, right? Like he's a villain, and I don't think we're supposed to look at him as a model to
no, because go ahead, sorry.
No, I mean the film sucks you in a little bit, I think, and this is part of what I think makes it so clever, because a lot of the stuff that the narrator is whining about at the beginning are like things that are, you know, like legitimately you want to critique, right? And so it sort of sucks you in by making it, but the film gets more and more uncomfortable, especially with all of the misogyny that the character has directed at Marla, and you know, just and then the fetishization of violence and that sort of need for antagonization, the need for violence is, again, I think the film's quite clear in telling us, look how much this sucks, right? But it's amazing to me that so many people watch this film and see all of that with a positive view.
Yeah, I mean, this has happened with so many movies, especially these movies that kind of are criticizing aggro masculinity in a way. Like it feels like bro culture like takes it and kind of like obscures like what the actual meaning of the movie is about.
I get what you mean. Like people take it the wrong way.
Well, and if you're comfortable, like, so one of the things that I think is interesting, and this isn't my original idea, but I've seen this pop up in sort of a number of different comments on the film, but this idea of the way that film language specifically, since we're talking about the film over the novel, of course, that film language often ties the images of guns to, you know, they use the images of guns as phallic imagery, right, and references to phallic imagery. And this movie starts out with a gun in the narrator's mouth. And so there's this idea about, like, is this somewhat about closeted, a closeted queer man fighting, you know, against his, own identity. So he fetishizes this image of the perfect man that he wants to be or potentially wants to be with, right? And the first line, I think, is it the first line or very early on? He says, when you have a gun barrel in your mouth, you only speak in vowels. Like, it's very, and then of course it returns to that theme at the end of the movie, right? It returns to the image of him with the gun in his mouth. And so there is definitely some idea of sort of suggesting a sort of a closeted, internalized homophobia in the main character and his sort of fantasies about hypermasculinity and male connection and misogyny that sort of gets sort of tied up around all of that.
Yeah.
Which is definitely interesting.
When I was taking a film class, one of the ideas I had, and I never got to do it because the teacher wanted us to write papers on movies that were currently streaming on a streaming service, but I wanted to write a paper on how this film like perfectly encapsulated like the Gen X society, and how Fincher's film The Social Network was kind of a great encapsulation of the millennial generation.
Interesting.
Do you think the killer will be the Gen Z one?
I don't think so. But and I mean, I think those are all interesting and valid topics. I think the other thing going on in here is like with the creation of Tyler Durden, or the epitomization, whether it's, you know, what he thinks the ideal masculine man is, or what, if he's a closeted queer man, what the kind of man he'd want to be with. But it's also like letting out his darker and more toxic sensibilities that we all have that we just choose not to bring out into us, right? Because we know that's not the right thing to do. But he's venting his frustration with society and his place in life. And because I mean, it's all brought up, you know, like they talk about, well, what do I do now? And do I really need to get married? I've been raised by a woman my whole life. Because Gen X is really the first generation that divorce started to become the normal. Like it became normal that a child was being raised in a one-parent household.
Right.
Yes, I do like that line he says about we're a generation of men who were raised by women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this reactionary outcome of that, this idea that what the way to address these frustrations is through violence, right? And through act, because that's sort of a twisted view of what masculinity is supposed to be.
Yeah, I'm not a violent person at all.
Yeah, and even its criticism or satirical look at consumerism and corporations like that, and like, oh, let's just burn it all down, anarchy, like that's still a topical issue, and maybe even more so right now.
Yes. The other thing I look into this movie is the consumerism side as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this movie comes out. I'm not sure. Did the book come out in '96? It's a pretty fast turnaround of adaptation. But this movie's coming out like at the end of the 20th century, at the end of the Clinton administration, when America is like at its all-time high economically growth.
Right.
And it's like really criticizing where we were going or where we were at that point in society. And also, even though Fincher was an established director already because he had 3 films under his belt, this is a groundbreaking year for movies and like for a lot of movies that would kickstart what we consider 21st century filmmaking. Like The Sixth Sense, The Matrix. These new up and coming directors with a interesting voice and different take on
which is
cinema.
Because all 3 of those movies are similar in their own ways.
Well, I mean, 2 of them have a very big twist, which Fight Club also subtly is showing you that like the twist is there, because when you rewatch, you notice you see like glimpses of Tyler like glitching in and out before
and he doesn't pay for his bus ticket.
There's a lot of like when you rewatch it, there's so many references to the fact that he's making Tyler up, or that Tyler is some sort of manifestation. Like you don't see it the first time, but after that, like rewatches over, like I'm always taken aback whenever I rewatch it, how many times you are given clues. The film has given you these heads up.
Yes.
Well, and I mean the whole Marla stuff, right? Like that gives it away too, right? Like because she just thinks he's being cruel, and he's crazy, and just being messed up, but which I guess she doesn't have a good track record with her relationships as she allows this to continue.
Yes. So the first Fleming Award I want to talk about with you guys is Best Production Design.
Okay.
Do you guys think it deserves it?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Collin.
I don't know I don't have in front of me sort of what we're comparing it to, but I definitely think, I mean, the film has a unique look to it that and takes a certain amount of, I think, artfulness in its execution to really pull off all the things that it's trying to do. Like I said, we're talking about the way the film is far more complicated than just what's on the surface, and I think that in some ways, and again, I think I struggled a bit at the beginning because some of it was so extreme, like whether it's the dilapidated house, just how dilapidated it was. Like there were times when I remember feeling like maybe they should have gone a little subtler into some of that set design and art direction. But I think it just, and like whether it's the fight club scenes themselves, it's just like the settings are just so perfect for what it's trying to do. And again, I guess it all comes back to the fact we have maybe one of the most unreliable narrators, like maybe other than Kaiser Soze. There's like very few unreliable narrators that are worse.
I don't
for being able to rely on them.
be the narrator, but I do relate to the narrator a lot because I have insomnia, and so does he.
I think there's a lot of aspects of Edward Norton's character that you can relate to, whether it's the insomnia or the dissatisfaction of where you are in your life and your career.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things, or having to see people who are suffering worse than you are to make you feel better about yourself. I mean,
yeah.
And that's what's so insidious about these, like whether it's incel movements or other, like that's what makes it so insidious is that there is so much that sort of legitimate frustration that they tap into to then reach these, like I said, twisted sort of conclusions about what the solutions need to be, right? And the film is really good at twisting that for you and trying to get you hooked in. And so, again, if you're going back to the art direction piece that you were asking about, Robbie, I think part of what works for me now when I look back on it is that I'm realizing, so the art direction may not be real worldish, but that's because it's the narrator's remembrance or vision of what he was living through, not an accurate depiction of what he was living through. That makes sense.
Yes, that does.
Also, to some of that art direction, especially how dilapidated the house is and how dungy it is, that's just David Fincher's aesthetic, right? He's always going to make it as dark and dungy as he wants it to be. Because, I mean, like, look at John Doe's apartment in Seven and some of those places they go to. Like, he amps it up when he wants it to be like that kind of vibe.
But again, I might give this movie more credit for that again because of the fact that it's a fantastical story that we are hearing from someone that is trying to color things a certain way as opposed to it being more literal.
Mm-hmm. And the difference, I guess, between him as a narrator and Verbal Kint as a narrator and The Usual Suspects is Verbal Kint's purposely being unreliable and playing with us because that's part of the plot with him talking to the police chief, whereas the narrator here is also blurred because he's not quite perfect or quite at open-mindedness of or awareness of who he is and what condition he's in.
Right, he's lying to himself as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes. Yes. My favorite aspect of this film is the cinematography, and I gave it best cinematography. I didn't have nominees or the group at that time, so I just picked the winners, and I picked Fight Club for best cinematography. And I think this movie has some amazing shots, whether it's them just talking or whether it's them fighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean,
beautifully shot. And I feel bad. I don't know who the cinematographer is.
It's Jeff Cronenweth.
Right.
He's the son of the Blade Runner cinematographer, Jordan Cronenweth.
Wow, that's some pedigree for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's an amazingly looking movie. I mean, it'd be hard to say because there's so many incredible looking movies from 1999 that it's hard to say, okay, this is the best, but I'm not going to argue that it doesn't deserve it because it's an amazingly looking film.
I know American Beauty won the Oscar, which is fair enough because it's Sam Mendes. He always puts like really hard work into the photography. So
okay, I'm curious now. I'm gonna look up and see because I know Fight Club definitely was not nominated for anything. I guess that'd be like against Fight Club as a movie to get Oscar nominations, right?
Yeah, but when you look at the actual list of nominees, you think, where's The Matrix?
Yeah, well, a funny story, kind of sidebarring here. When we watched those Oscars, I watched those with my parents because I was a teenager. The Matrix like won every category it was nominated for, right?
Yeah.
And my mom was like, "Well, why didn't that get nominated for Best Picture? It's winning all the Oscars."
So yeah,
I was
Fight Club,
like-
I guess, did get nothing, not even a nomination. Is that right? Which is, I mean, for me, it might be the one that I might really pick out would be adaptation. But
Okay, so the nominees were for cinematography: American Beauty, The End of the Affair, The Insider, Sleepy Hollow, and Snow Falling on Cedars. Wow, yeah, no Matrix, no Talented Mr. Ripley, no Sixth Sense.
The Matrix is just mostly green screen, so I wouldn't really put that in best cinematography, even though Bill Pope does.
I was going to say, he's an amazing cinematographer. But yeah, American Beauty makes sense, although Sleepy Hollow and The Insider are both really well shot movies.
Sleepy Hollow is great, and it's Emmanuel Lubezki, so it's going to look beautiful.
Fight Club is a beautiful looking film, even though so much of what we're seeing is ugly. Like it's, so I would definitely think it's well worth praising the cinematography in it.
Yes,
that's one of the things with Fincher. Even as dark and dungy as his movies look, they're always well shot. Like they look great.
About to say Mank was beautifully shot.
It does appear, and I don't know if I am have bad information here, but it does appear that this may be Jeff Cronenweth's first film as a cinematographer. So good for him right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and he shot Gone Girl, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Social Network. So I guess they like working with each other.
They'll need to see 1 Hour Photo. He also shot that.
Okay.
Oh, it's such a good movie. Robin Williams is incredible in that.
I imagine. And I need to see I've seen Being the Ricardos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That film was just a bit meh.
It looked good though. I'll give it that. Yeah.
It looked good.
In theory, that should have been an easy slam dunk for Aaron Sorkin, but I think he's better as a writer than a director.
100%. He should have got Fincher or Rob Reiner to direct it. Yes. So it also won Best Editing at my Fleming Awards. I have this little theory in my head that Tyler edits the film.
You know what? And definitely editing is one that's definitely stands out as well. Like obviously the structure, the visual structure of the movie is so different from most other films. And maybe we've seen more films go in the direction like this, but I think it was quite groundbreaking, even from Fincher's previous work in the way that, and again, partially because of the needs of the story, the need for the story to play a bit of bait and switch on us, but also for us to experience it different than a regular movie.
The Matrix won Best Editing at the Oscars.
Right.
I'd say that's definitely second place.
Yeah, like I said, there's something about those three movies in particular. And I mean, on top of a stacked year that year was for film, but there's something about those three films I mentioned that like kind of ushers in 21st century.
They all kind of have similar undertones.
I mean, that is part of it, but there's something about all three of those films that ushers in 21st century filmmaking to me.
And Fight Club both include a character who courts to a character who isn't actually there.
Mhm.
My experience with Sixth Sense was a bit of a weird one because, and I don't attribute this to anything. I think I just misunderstood what was going on, but I thought it was like Ghost. And so I'm sitting there. I thought everybody knew he was dead and that he's this ghost that's working with this kid. And I was like, and at one point I turned to my friend and said, "Oh, this is such a ripoff of Ghost." And they were like, "What are you talking about?" And then I realized, sort of partway through, I realized, wait, is he not dead? Like I thought maybe I had anyway. So for me, my first experience with Sixth Sense was difficult because I misunderstood what was happening and what I was supposed to be getting out of it, and therefore I didn't enjoy it as much as I think I would have if I had it be a twist. Anyways, Sixth Sense is a film I still struggle with, and I generally am a Shyamalan fan. I generally like his work. So, but
I just watched Knock at the Cabin. That was really good.
Yes, I also appreciated it. I think more than a lot of people did.
Yeah,
I liked it as well. I know it varies from the book, but from what I understand, people would have hated that movie more if it was a straight up adaptation of the book.
I have mixed feelings about the changing in the ending. I had mixed feelings going into the film because I know we're not here to talk about.
All right.
We're getting way off, but I had a lot of mixed feelings going into it.
So,
Felt
just
good about
for
it.
the record, I did not give this movie Best Adapted Screenplay.
Okay.
Okay.
What did you give that year?
Yeah.
I'm curious to know.
I gave it to a movie that I thought had a more straightforward plot and a lot of emotional depth. The Green Mile.
Okay.
I mean, you can't go wrong with Frank Darabont. He's a great screenwriter.
Yeah,
I
he is.
don't know who this Jim Ulse is, and it says he's only ever written Fight Club and Jumper.
Oh wow, what a various degree of movies there.
Yeah.
I may have given it that year to The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Oh yes.
That film does such a good job adapting.
That's probably my favorite Anthony Minghella movie.
Oh yeah, but I think Fight Club would be there for me too. I just again really like what they did with the movie and how they translated the source material to the screen. So
yes,
I'm one of those big. I know there's a big debate right now over whether Barbie should be adapted or original, and I'm one of those people that falls on the original side. For me, an adaptation is only if there's actually a story that you are adapting to the screen medium as opposed to some other medium, not just because you throw out characters that have been used before.
Like Top Gun Maverick, I understand because they do reference the first movie throughout the second movie, but with Barbie, there is no Barbie film or book, so
yeah.
I know people have different opinions on it. I tend to be pretty purist on that. I'm like kind of the person because I love
like the Lego movie would count as adapted because Batman and Dumbledore and Milhouse are in it. It makes more sense to have the Lego movie as adapted.
Yeah, I don't know. I still have did somebody have to dream up this story and get them to original? That's my bias, but I recognize that people see it differently. But
yeah,
I'm even sequels shouldn't automatically when Glass Onion was adapted screenplay. I was like, what?
Yeah,
the heck?
that won the most recent Fleming Awards I did for adapted screenplay.
Yeah, I don't. It's not adapted. It's just one character he's putting in another story.
I know.
Yeah.
There's not even a reference to the first movie.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's
I'm Cody accused Puss in Boots of not being an adapted screenplay. Mike Cody, have you never heard of Puss in Boots the table?
But isn't Puss in Boots based on a fairy tale?
Yeah.
So there's a source material that predates it being related to the Shrek franchise.
Yeah, and Shrek is based on a book too, so
Shrek is based on a book, so that's fair. That's because it doesn't have to adapt it very closely. Like I just saw Hunting in Venice, and from what I understand, it's not a book I've read, but from what I understand, the plot is very different. But it's still an adaptation. because it takes the basics of the story and tells a story. I mean, you could say The Bourne Identity, the original film, like the original Matt Damon film, veers so much from the plot of the original, but it's still an adaptation because it takes the general story and makes and tells that story in a new medium. And so I'm okay with adaptations not being super close, but I still think you have to be taking a story somebody else came up with and making it something, making it for a new medium. But anyways, we're getting off track here.
I'm gonna bring it back. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard Chuck Palahniuk said this adaptation was better than his book.
I think I've heard that too. So it's the opposite of Stephen King's reaction to movies. But I think he's a fan of what they did with
Stephen King is only very much against Kubrick's Shining, other than some clear bad movie. Oh, he loves everything Darabont's done, and he said he wished he had the balls to do what Darabont did in The Mist.
Right.
I think he's gotten a less antagonistic if people make changes, as long as it's still the main story.
I think he was pretty happy with Dr. Sleep, from what I understand, the film adaptation of Dr. Sleep, which tries to blend, the book and the movie from the previous film. So I think he seemed okay with that. So maybe he is coming around to being okay with people playing with his ideas a little bit.
I mean, his dispute against the Lawnmower Man is valid. The only thing that thing has in common with that story is the title.
Right.
So that's totally not an adapted screenplay, if that's the case.
I guess so. I know it's a very short story. I've never read it, but the movie is not good, and it's bonkers.
I've never seen it. It's one I've missed.
Neither have I.
You guys aren't missing anything. Early 90s VR. That's all I'm going to say.
But getting back to Fight Club, I think it is a good adaptation. I think it takes the themes of the novel. I think it translates them into a film language that is definitely very interesting and not easy, which I appreciate. Like I said, I think one of the reasons why this film remains a film that I love is because they didn't take the easy way out and spoon feed you the message or the moral of the story. They'd make you work for it a little bit. Again, I think it's clear when you look through that this is not an endorsement of the narrator or Tyler's behavior. Marla is a character who's completely portrayed as how she's seen through the male gaze and is abused for it. Like, we are not supposed to be on board with what happens in this movie.
No,
we're not.
Have either of you read the 2 comic book sequels Palahniuk wrote?
No, I think that this should be a story that's kind of left where it is. The film ends on a fantastic shot, on a really good note.
I agree, because I know a lot of people, when the first sequel came out, were like, well, maybe Fincher will do what Danny Boyle did and come back. I don't want Fincher to come back and do another Fight Club.
No,
I agree.
Best off doing standalone movies.
Yeah.
Yes. So it could also be divided, because he could be either lead or supporting, but I gave my Best Actor award to Brad Pitt.
Yeah, that's a good question on that one. Whether the Oscars didn't have to answer this question, so they didn't. But
so I have this argument about Charlize Theron in Mad Max Fury Road, as I consider her the lead, because most of the plot revolves around her more than it does Max.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who thinks, since we were speaking of Frank Darabont, I'm one of those people who thinks that Red in The Shawshank Redemption is the lead character.
Oh, absolutely.
The story is about him.
They're co-leads, him and Andy.
Yeah, but we're getting it from Red's perspective. He's narrating the story.
But Andy is our, as Justin would say, through line.
Well, then that's the argument with Mad Max too, then, right? Because he's our audience surrogate.
Yeah, he's our audience surrogate, but it's Furiosa's movie. Her name should be on. Should be called Furiosa Fury Road.
Yeah. But yeah, you can make the argument that they're co-leads or that Pitt could be considered supporting, but I think it is one of his stronger performances.
I agree. I think all the three main cast members do excellent work here.
Yes.
I think Brad Pitt is very strong. I think Edward Norton is strong. I think Helena Bonham Carter is excellent as well.
Yes, this is probably her best performance.
It's kind of a breakout role for her, isn't it? For people who didn't know her from those British dramas?
I guess so.
At least maybe for American audiences.
I think it showed us that she could do something else. I think that she was getting a bit typecast. And this threw a complete wrench. I remember being
Frankenstein be her breakout role?
Well, I know she'd been acting for over a decade, but like Colin's saying, this is kind of showing her range as an actor because she had been in what? Frankenstein, Remains of the Day. I mean, she was kind of playing the typical in those stuffy British dramas, as they call them, or costume dramas.
Yeah, I get that.
And I mean, this is probably a gateway to her getting Bellatrix in the Harry Potter movies and working with Tim Burton.
Yes. Although I don't think she'll be working with him anytime soon. I don't know. Ever.
Yeah, no, but and I believe it was Brad Pitt's suggestion to cast her in the role.
Right. Who else was meant to play her?
I have no idea.
I know they originally wanted Russell Crowe and Matt Damon for Tyler and the Narrator.
Really?
Okay. I mean, I can see it, but I don't know if Matt Damon would give off the same energy Norton is able to give of like desperation and anxiety and frustration.
Norton has more of that everyman vibe, right? That I think is needed, and Pitt especially, I think, is like there's a reason Brad Pitt is playing that role, and he's as sort of at the peak of his sort of physical presence, prowess, kind of like. Again, when you've seen it all the way through, you understand why Brad Pitt looks the way that he does, and I'm not sure that. I mean, sure, there are other actors who could have done it, but I just think that Brad Pitt exemplifies that as possible.
Some people they thought about for Marla, if they really wanted to go the Gen X route, Janine Garofalo apparently was. And they tried to get her, but she objected to the sexual content in the movie.
Makes sense.
And then Courtney Love and Winona Ryder were two other candidates.
Well, and Marla's an interesting character because there are moments that we get of her as a real person, but so much of the movie, and again, this comes down to how well the movie, I think, is structured, is that so much of the movie is, again, her through the narrator's view and the way that he puts her down. Like he has I think he's very much a misogynist, and then the way that he views her is through with a lot of hate. But there are little moments that we get glimpses of her humanity that Helena brings out, but also the movie highlights, so that we are reminded at certain moments that she's a human being and that she has some agency. But
yeah, and some of those would have been good choices. I saw another one was Reese Witherspoon. Not sure that would have worked.
She was too young at the time.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, I didn't give Best Supporting Actress to Helena Bonham Carter. I went with the Oscars and chose Angelina Jolie.
Another breakout role.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so literally, I have ex-husband and wife winning in the same year. I've only just flipped.
Well, that's the nature of the business, right?
Yes. you want to know what the other 2 acting awards are?
Yeah.
Yes.
So Best Actress, also the Girl Interrupted lady, Winona Ryder.
Okay.
Yeah.
An actor, I just couldn't say no to Michael Clark Duncan for The Green Mile.
Okay.
That is a strong year in those categories for supporting actor. I think any of the other 4 nominees, no disrespect to Sir Michael Caine for the Cider House Rules, but any of those other 4 people who were nominated, I think should have won that category.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been Tom Cruise's best performance.
Yes.
You know, arguably. Jude Law is amazing in The Talented Mr. Ripley.
With Jude Law, his American and English accent does like switch around a couple of times.
Maybe, yes.
Yeah.
But it is a very good performance and another breakout performance, really. I mean, I know he's in Gattaca, right? He has a supporting role in that, but that was a very underseen film. So
I'd say his best performance comes 2 years later in AI.
oh, he's great in that.
But Fight Club did win Best Cast, and this was actually voted for by when I was inserting different categories into the mix.
This was, I think, speaking of the sort of broader cast, wasn't this the first time Jared Leto had sort of taken on the sort of the darker, like this is before we sort of knew him as a, you know, that kind of actor. Like he had kind of been a bit of a teen
males in this movie, he's probably the most toxic one.
Yeah.
Well, you could probably say that in reality too.
Yes,
I've heard that he likes teenage girls and he's 50.
Ugh. Well, I just meant all his shenanigans. That just makes it more ick.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think. Was he in things before? I know. Yeah, he was in.
He's in Girl Interrupted as well.
Wasn't he on My So-Called Life?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that was his breakthrough.
Oh yeah, he had a few supporting roles before Fight Club, but this is probably
mine I've seen. That's probably the earliest one I've seen of his filmography.
But I think Colin's right. This is kind of the first time he gets noticed and like becomes what we know him as today.
Yeah, because because I didn't know he was in a band at the time I first watched Fight Club, and I obviously before all this weird stuff came out about him, I followed him on social media, and my friend was like, "You know who Jared Leto is?" I'm like, "Yeah, he's in Fight Club." I'm like, "Oh, he's a singer." I'm like, "What?" Yeah, he sings in a band called 30 Seconds to Mars.
Well, and go ahead.
I was gonna say when I found out he was in a band, I was like, the guy from Panic Group has a band.
The one thing that's another piece that sort of ties in some of the queer readings of, and maybe sort of a closeted narrator, is there's the scene where he fights Jared Leto's character, and he makes a comment about
probably the
wanting
best
to destroy something beautiful.
Ever been in.
He talks about wanting to destroy something beautiful, and I think there's a few levels to that. First of all, he's recognizing this, male beauty on the one hand, but secondly, there's this anger and desire to destroy, right? So there's a piece of like, definitely it could be interpreted as internalized homophobia. It could also just be interpreted, if you don't necessarily read the main character, the narrator, as closeted, you could just see it as sort of homophobic in general, this idea of needing to destroy male beauty for your for their own purposes. So there's that piece, I think, is an interesting one, and certainly one that it's a moment that I think about each time that I come across that. That's one of the scenes that stands out for me, is this, the violence in this film. I think it's important for us to talk about it, is really uncomfortable, right? And so much Hollywood violence is done in a way that makes it palatable, makes us okay with watching it, makes us generally comfortable, even when it wants us to sort of evoke some kind of emotional response of sadness or tragedy or maybe heroism. Especially then they try to make us more comfortable with it if it's trying to, make us sort of trigger heroism. But in this movie, I still can't watch it without like cringing through a lot of it, through a lot of the violence, because I don't think the film is designed in any way to make us be okay with the fight scenes that we're watching.
Yeah, which is interesting because I remember when this was coming out, like it was controversial. Oh, it's one of the most violent films since Natural Born Killers, and it's funny that both those movies were being criticized by like media and like people who hadn't seen the film, when both those movies are like kind of criticizing violence in media.
Right, 100%. Yeah.
And I know, like, famously, Roger Ebert gave this movie a thumbs down. I remember Entertainment Weekly gave this movie an F, but like 2 years later, they listed it as the #1 movie to buy on DVD.
Well, and remember, Rosie O'Donnell got so mad on her show, she revealed the twist because she didn't want people to go see it. Like, people had very strong reactions to this movie for a movie that kind of bomb might be an exaggeration, but certainly underperformed.
Yeah, very much underperformed and did not like. I mean, there were people who liked the movie and were enjoying it. A lot of online critics and younger critics. But like, it really caught attention, and this is, the importance of physical media. When it went to DVD and video rental, it blew up. And
it's a great example. Like, so many movies that, bomb at the box office end up finding another, like, all the way back to The Wizard of Oz, right? And It's a Wonderful Life. And there's so many examples throughout history of film history about films sort of finding an audience later through some other
Look at Vertigo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You can name so many that are now considered to be amongst the greatest films ever. And I think Fight Club has been revisited. I think it still evokes a lot of strong emotions for people, and some of it is because it in its critique of, and I think there's a legitimate feminist critique of this movie that says, it in its critique of toxic masculinity, it embraces too much of it, or it makes, and I get that, and I think that there's a critique that can be made that way that wouldn't be unfair to the film.
Right, the pendulum is kind of swung back and forth, where the initial controversial reaction was just to the violence, and then people are like, oh, but it's criticizing all these things, and then now 20 plus years later, people are like, yeah, but it really kind of, like you said, pushes a little too much into it and feels like it's embracing it a little bit,
It
so
is hard to watch the way the film treats Marla, to be honest. Like, it makes me very uncomfortable. And I mean, again, I think that's on purpose. And I think the reaction we're supposed to have to the way we're seeing Marla is to have a bad reaction to that, right? Like, that's how I feel about it. And I hope I'm not wrong. I don't know if there's a right or a wrong in that, but I feel like we're supposed to not like the way we're feeling about Marla. We're supposed, and because I think sometimes really good art actually makes us feel something and then makes us feel bad for feeling it, right? Or not makes us feel bad, but maybe makes us question why we're feeling that, and then do some self-examination around that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I mean, not only just the treatment of her, but you can tell, like, in the way she acts and the things she says, that she comes from an abused or mistreated environment already.
Yes. I mean, there's that famous line that supposedly she ad-libbed on the set where she talks about, having underage sex that is on the one hand funny, on the other hand horrific, and on but again, speaks to her background.
I don't get it. When I was like 15, like there were like people around my age having sex, and I didn't really bat an eyelid. But now I'm an adult and I hear about this, I'm kind of disgusted.
Right.
Yeah,
well, she says grade school, which I guess can mean different things. I always think of it as feel like elementary school, which is why the line when I first heard it was like, and I think it's funny and like the way we laugh at it very uncomfortable things as a way of diffusing how uncomfortable we are with it, right? But yes, grade school, I guess, technically could be, up to high school as well, but still.
But that's still underage, and it still could indicate some sort of abuse, whether it was consensual or not, because it probably could have been a grooming or manipulation type of situation. I mean, it just shows that like she's clearly got issues as much as he does, and he's taking full advantage of that.
Well, and
of that vulnerability.
Witnessed her suicide attempt in the movie as well. Like, this person has a lot of going on that the film often, purposefully, like I said, sort of, it disregards or, uses for its own purposes. And again, I think the film is trying to make us reflect on how we're feeling about her and how she's presented. And like I said, I think that that's maybe why there are some critiques of the film that can, maybe can see that as being more damaging than helpful. I don't know. But
yes, and I gave David Fincher Best Director.
I mean, there's a lot of strong candidates for 1999.
No disrespect to Sam Mendes, I love the bloke, but it was his first movie. He hasn't really had, to say his first movie wins him Best Director kind of degrades all his other movies.
It happens a lot, right? Wasn't with Wolves, Kevin?
I think,
especially with actors, they get a lot of times get an Oscar for their first directing job out of the bag.
But even this year, like M. Night Shyamalan's up for Best Director at the Oscars. And
it's technically not his first movie, even though
that's true. You're right.
His second big movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to give props to, I see Michael Mann's in here for The Insider. I think that's a movie that unfortunately has not.
I would have liked to have seen Lillian Lana nominated for Matrix.
Yep.
Yes, because that's an incredibly made movie. But yeah, Michael Mann's Insider, not nearly talked about.
No, and we've lost track of it, which is too bad because it's a strong movie. And I want to
rewatch it. It's on Disney Plus in the UK, so I might check it out soon. I want to watch all of Michael Mann's movies before Ferrari.
Yeah,
you can skip the keep. You can skip the keep. But it's well shot.
The Insider's one not to skip, though. I would definitely put that one on.
I need to see Black Hat as well.
I like it.
Yeah.
I know it's not a well-liked movie, but I enjoy it.
There's other films here that like Best Director, like Boys Don't Cry, and
Spike Jonze for being John Malkovich, which I think is his first movie.
Yeah, good.
And The Talented Mr. Ripley, like you said, Anthony Minghella did an amazing job on that. Both as screenplay.
Why isn't that his best? Yeah, they could have given Best Director for him. No disrespect to English Patient, but it's just beautiful to look at.
The story is so beautiful.
The story is a bit 50-50.
The fact that it didn't spawn a Ripley series of movies still makes me sad. It's such a missed opportunity. Matt Damon was so great in the role, and I think as he aged, he could have really taken that role on. I understand
but we're getting Saltburn, which is very inspired by Talented Mr. Ripley.
Yeah, I did not see the Malkovich film, and I hear the Barry Pepper one's not very good.
No, unfortunately, they're not of the same at all. I know they're doing a series, and it's going to have Andrew Scott, which I think is amazing casting. So I'm excited. I just hope that actually ever arrives. Like, it's been in the works for a long time, and I don't know what where it's standing right now, if they've shot any of it, if it's on hold because of the strikes, if it's not, if it's already done. Like, I don't know where we're at, but I hope that it becomes I hope it hits soon because I think it's got a great cast.
Yes.
Off topic, I hear he might be getting some nominations for his new film that's coming out.
Which one? Who is, sorry?
Andrew Scott. What is it called? It's with him and Paul Mescal.
Yes, I've heard amazing things about that. And who is the director of that? It's someone interesting. Shoot, now I forget. Now we're all Googling as we keep getting off course from
Fight Club.
Fight Club.
Well,
yeah.
I'll tell you something I'm slightly ashamed of, Colin.
Oh, it's Andrew High. That's right. The Weekend. I knew it was somebody that I really loved. In terms of queer cinema, he's an amazing filmmaker, and he probably doesn't get as much attention in mainstream as much, but films like The Weekend, The Show Looking, he did this amazing, Lean on Pete is this amazing film that nobody saw a few years ago, but anyways, I keep getting off track.
I did 45 years. Oh, I was just going to say the topic you brought up about like being one of the most haunting things in the movie when he fights Jared Leto and said he wanted to destroy something beautiful, like about the homophobia maybe in that. I had a Fight Club shirt that said that on the back of it because it had the bar of soap.
Right.
Yeah. For a while. And no longer have that shirt, and I'm not in my 20s anymore, so.
Does this mean I'm going to have to change my favorite movie in the next 2 years?
Well, you don't have to, but I feel like, and this is just me, but I feel like this movie has changed for me in a lot of ways. I used to think this was Fincher's best movie, and as I've gotten older and been married and have stepkids, this movie doesn't hit me the same way. I still appreciate the craftsmanship and the commentary and all the acting in it. But it just hits different for me. Maybe because I'm less angry because I'm older and more mature. And
does that mean your favorite 1999 film has changed too?
Oh yeah, I would say probably mine's The Matrix, just for how just amazing that movie is.
Yeah.
Well, 1999 was also the year of The Phantom Menace, which is now going through a bit of a renaissance and a reevaluation.
No, I've always loved The Phantom Menace.
Me too. I've always thought it was I thought it was unfairly maligned when it came out, for sure.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much that it's such a fun movie to watch, and there's so much about the sort of Shakespearean backstage politics going on in it that I find really fascinating for a movie aimed at children, general audiences. But so I mean, again, what a year! What an interesting year for film, for sure.
And obviously, this won my best film award, 1999.
Fight Club.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's stacked year. Great year for animation. Great year for independent film. Boys Don't Cry. Being John Malkovich.
Yes.
Maybe David O. Russell's best movie, Three Kings.
I need to see Three Kings.
It's just a really stacked year of movies.
Well, I would. So going on in terms of reevaluating, I mean, like I said, my opinions of this movie have evolved over time. I think generally I've become, I've actually become more. I appreciate the movie more as I mature and as I get more open to understanding it as a critique and sort of seeing it's very much like reading The Catcher in the Rye now and realizing we're supposed to hate Holden Caulfield, right?
I watched Rebel Without a Cause twice, which I know was a big influence on this movie.
Yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I watched it, I remember thinking, "Why is this kid so whiny?" And then the second time, I was trying to think about at the time the 50s, and I was like, actually, this film kind of has a point.
I think what's interesting is I think that it's not very common that maybe it's a little more common in reading, but in films especially, it's rare that we're not supposed to like the subject of the film, and we're supposed to usually identify with them. Usually they come around, even if they've made some bad choices, they come around and we're supposed to identify with them. We're supposed to.
And I will never forget the first time I watched The Graduate last year.
That's a good example as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I watched that a couple of years ago, and I'm thinking, this guy's creepy, and this guy's doing some like lots of red flags in this movie with his
He
character.
is
Like,
the most unlikable film character ever.
I don't know if ever, but he's up there. But I mean, that's an argument, right? Does the protagonist of the story have to be likable?
Or are we supposed to identify with them, right? And in this case, I think one of the things about Fight Club that is so difficult for so many people is that I think we are supposed to identify with him, or at least a certain part of the audience is, but we're not supposed to like that we identify with him. And I think we're supposed to feel really uncomfortable about identifying with him. And that, I think, as I've matured, I think I become more appreciative of that tactic, but it's also really difficult. And I think there are members of the audience that aren't able to identify with them because maybe they're like, for example, women. And I think it would be great to have a discussion, a discussion with women about this film in terms of like how you're supposed to view how watching this as a woman is
I've shown this movie to women. One of them was a platonic friend, one of them was a partner.
I think there would be a lot of really interesting insights to come out of that discussion for sure. But I think male audience members are supposed to identify with the narrator and are supposed to be unhappy about identifying with them and maybe reevaluate some things because of that, right? Like it's almost pointing the finger a little bit. And movies like that are rare and they're difficult, they're uncomfortable. Yeah. And one of the ways we deal with discomfort, like I said, is we laugh or we minimize it or we push back and embrace the things that we're supposed to be feeling uncomfortable about. And so that, obviously creates a lot of, because it doesn't Chuck Palahniuk, doesn't he take credit for having coined the term snowflake?
Yes.
Yeah, it's even in this movie, which is almost 20 years before alt-right politics start using it for what they call when people get their feelings hurt.
Yeah, but it's used differently here.
I only say that when people really argue with me about a specific subject that I'm really strongly on.
Do you want to know something that's funny that I never noticed before in this movie?
What's that?
Go for it.
The scene near the end of the movie where he's confronting Marla and they're in the restaurant and then he tries to get her to go on the bus. The theater they're standing next to is playing 7 Years in Tibet.
Is it? I've never noticed that.
So did he watch a Brad Pitt movie and make Tyler Durden look like Brad Pitt on purpose?
There is a question I've always wanted to ask. What happened to Tyler's hair?
Oh, you mean when he shaves his head? Or like when he has the shaved head, I guess?
When he has the shaved head at the end, it's just kind of like, okay, why does this version now have shaved head?
Right. Well, again, I think it's...
I think because he's having all the...
Go ahead, yeah. I think you and I were thinking similar thoughts there. Go ahead.
We might have had the same thought, but I was saying because all these members of Project Mayhem are shaving their heads, right? That's part of their initiation into it. So maybe that's why he's projecting Tyler to look like that.
Yeah.
But also his fantasies are falling apart, right?
That too.
The delusions are starting to come to the surface.
There's one thing we haven't spoken about, and that's the other rock star in this film, Meatloaf.
Meatloaf, yeah. One of his better film performances, I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
Again, Meatloaf is one of those ones like that. Some of the art direction where I think it's a bit exaggerated, but again, I get the narrator is projecting. I imagine if there was a real what's his name, Bob? Why am I forgetting?
His name is Robert Paulson.
Robert Paulson, right? So, but the real person wasn't quite as extreme in terms of the body imaging or any of that, but that the narrator was seeing it that way and remembering it that way for a few reasons. One, to sort of degrade this person, but also and build himself up a little bit, but also, as he sort of makes his way through, venerating him as he makes his way through Project Mayhem. So again, to me, that's a bit of the narrator, coloring things for us in a certain way.
I think so. I think that's on point.
Yeah, but the idea of a man being feminized, he talks about his man tits, so that, and using that against him, using that as some kind of like way of demasculating him. Like it's again, it's shining through the narrator's biases, right, and the narrator's prejudices.
And he is kind of a vile and Machiavellian character to begin with before his delusions, because like the way he has that conversation with that woman on the plane about like the car company policies.
Yeah.
It's like
he's already an asshole. Yep.
Yeah. Like, there's no need to do that to that poor woman. Like now she's freaking out about her car.
Yeah.
I love the opening theme to this film as well.
Is that by the Dust Brothers? It's the techno score.
Yes, I don't think he was friends with Trent and Atticus at this point.
Well, I don't know where Trent and Atticus are yet in their relationship, but he had used Closer as he did a different take on Closer for the opening credits in 7. So I guess he already liked the 9 Inch Nails. But of course, that's industrial, and that's very much Fincher's vibe, right? An industrial sound. The thing this movie did for me, and sorry if this makes anyone feel old or young, it kind of introduced me to the Pixies, but also this movie kind of overplayed that song, because now every time in a movie or TV show someone comes to the realization they're crazy or they're having a mental breakdown, they play that song.
Right. Right. I hadn't put that together, but you're right.
Yeah, because I think it's in Mr. Robot, and I think it's in The Leftovers, and I forget there's another movie where it gets used, and it's like, oh, I've come to the realization I'm not okay.
Right. Well, that's a sign that's
the other film it's in.
What's that?
Mr. Nobody.
That's a sign that a movie has, or a piece of pop culture has entered, like that it's, that it's touched a nerve, is that when things start then referencing that, right, and pulling from it. So,
well, there's even a movie out now that's it's a coming of age teen comedy about a group of girls that are trying to get dates, called The Bottoms, and they start like a fight club in their school.
Yep. I'd be curious to see that one, and see how it references again, because of the nature of its story, and from a female perspective, I'd be curious to see how it plays with the ideas in Fight Club.
Bodies in it.
Did they use it in Bodies? I didn't remember hearing.
Rachel Sennett from Bottoms is in Bodies.
Oh yeah, right.
I mean, Bodies has a little bit of, it certainly has a twist.
A really funny one.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I've heard that's considered the ultimate Gen Z horror movie right now.
Yeah, it's probably the defying Gen Z movie.
That'd be interesting. I'm not aware, but it is interesting. Like I said, it's definitely an interesting twist. Like I think it's smart, and it's subverts expectations, and it's I think that movie got is one of those ones that, because it was only, I don't know if it was a hit or if it was just sort of middling, but I mean, it wasn't a breakthrough or something, but I think that it might stand the test of time a little bit. We'll have to see.
I think it did well for its budget, because it was an A24 movie, I think, and like horror, those A24 tends to make their money back, and it being a horror films tend to, and especially last year, horror films were like doing really well in the
The last few
theaters.
years, the most reliable genre seems to be horror for sure. Yeah. It seems like, well, there's been a lot of underperforming, sort of expected blockbusters. The go-to safe thing seems to be horror movies. People go out to the movie theaters to watch them.
And I don't think anyone, when they were looking at the summer releases, even though the whole Barbieheimer thing was a big marketing tool, I don't think anyone thought Barbie was going to end up being the biggest hit of the summer or the year.
I think it'll be here. I can't imagine too many of the releases that are left outpacing it, but maybe something will. But I think Barbie's going to be the big film of 2023. We'll see, but I think I'm feeling pretty confident in saying that it's going to be hard for another movie to catch quite up to it. But
Yeah.
We'll see how many of them actually get released. It does feel like
that's true too.
Yeah, it does feel like there's been a number of cancellations, but it kind of feels like they're moving forward with the rest. The studios are going to hold.
If I was to produce a remake of this movie, I would love Emerald Fennell to direct it.
I mean, that would be great to get a female's perspective of this story, right?
I think so too. I think that would be fascinating to get, and that's why maybe Bottoms would be interesting. I mean, who knows? Maybe Bottoms doesn't. I haven't read enough about it, but I'd like to check it out and see if it's what
I
it does.
just looked online, and it's meant to be on Amazon Prime internationally.
Okay.
So yes, I'm looking forward to seeing that one.
Very good. And did it get were those all the awards that you gave it?
Yes, just those ones.
Okay.
So cinematography, editing, adapted screenplay, actor, director, picture.
Cody didn't win adapted screenplay.
Oh, that's right. You gave it to The Green Mile. That's right. My bad.
Did you say director? I can't remember if you said
director. Film, director, actor, cast.
Best cast.
Production design.
Right.
Production design. Yeah.
I mean, I think it remains a strong film for me. Like I said, I think it's a complicated one to love, but because I think if you love it and it just sort of very on a more straight up level, there's something wrong. I think that to appreciate it, it really does have to be kind of a complicated relationship with it. But I think it lives up to it if you do. Like, I think it offers a lot for people who want to think and reflect a lot about it as you're watching it and after you've watched it. And for me, I appreciate that in a movie. Something that, I like a light movie that can be just entertaining and distracting too, of course, like all different kinds. But I really like movies that really make you work, really make you think, really make you reflect, revisit each time you watch it, gives you some more to chew on, appreciate it in different levels, different sort of ways, have bits that are really uncomfortable. And for me, Fight Club is all of those things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to make it stand the test of time too, is not just the central like themes and the twist, but just like all these different feelings and interpretations, and sometimes you kind of having all those all at the same time while you're watching it.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh yeah. There's a scene early on where Brad Pitt he's in an airport. It's before he meets him, and he's going one way on the airport conveyor belt, and Brad Pitt's going the other way. And I always wonder, is he starting to imagine him, or does he see someone that he thinks, oh, I want to look like that guy? And so that's where some of the inspiration comes. I like your idea of the 7 years in Tibet theory too, though.
That's an interesting theory, Colin. That's an interesting theory, because there's even a scene where he looks at him just jumping in a car and driving off. I'm like, so is he actually is he just randomly jumped in the car, or is he just imagining a scenario that he wants to do?
Right, because that's after they've met. But it is again, you're right. Is he like I mean, he's imagining him at this point, I think. So is he seeing someone get into a vehicle and he's projecting himself into that scene, or is he just picturing himself jumping into an expensive car and driving off, right? Like, I think there's a lot of ways you could look at that and think about it.
The other question I have is, how did he manage to burn his whole apartment?
Well,
they sort of explain it. Yeah, like they talk about leaving the gas on, and yeah, they explain it. It's just again, you wonder how subconscious those actions were, or how much of it was deliberate, right? Like how much of his lying to himself was he aware of for a period of time, right? I don't know. That's a good question.
The more important question is, what were those dudes thinking that saw him beating himself up and was like, hey, let's join in? Like, if I saw someone fighting themselves, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to walk away now.
I heard somewhere that the first punch Edward Norton makes on Brad Pitt is actually real.
Also, he did actually punch Brad Pitt in the ear.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I wonder if the reason Norton and Fincher haven't worked together again is because how difficult Norton is as an actor, and Fincher is such a perfectionist of like what he wants and what he wants for the movie.
But Edward Norton is a favorite of the perfectionist, Wes Anderson.
Yeah, so that's true. So
yeah, but they just might click better maybe than Fincher did with him, right? Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a lot of pairings of actors and directors that they just seem to work really well together, and they might not work as well with other creatives.
Which I guess Pitt and Fincher work really well together.
Yeah, literally, Brad and Jared are the only two that has worked with Fincher more than once from this film.
Oh, from this film. There's a few people he's worked with a few actually, nope, the guy who plays Edward Norton's boss is in Zodiac.
Yes. Oh, and the mechanic bloke, Holt Cannery.
He was in Alien 3, and he was also one of the leads in his great TV show Mindhunter.
Yes. Is that how he's become a big actor now because of Mindhunter? Because he was in Wrath of Man and Nightmare Alley.
Well, he's been around for a long time. He's just a character actor, but I guess Mindhunter probably certainly helped his pedigree in getting some bigger roles and some big-time filmmakers.
A small-time actor likes in this, Ian Bailey. He was in a series called Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, for some reason I thought maybe Helena Bonham Carter had, but I don't see anything else in her filmography that does connect her with Fincher. So I guess not.
Yeah.
No, there's not a lot of actresses other than Rooney Mara, I think, that he's worked with more than once.
I mean, his films don't tend to be very female-centric, to be fair.
No, they're not.
His last movie had a brilliant female supporting performance in Amanda Seyfried.
Oh, there's certainly great female performances in some of his movies, but I mean, I guess Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Gone Girl are really...
And Alien 3, they're his three.
Yeah.
He's better with women than Nolan is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a few that he's done that focus on women. I mean, does Gone Girl focus on women, or is it? I don't know. That one
there's a good argument that it doesn't, and
the case of Benjamin Button is women centric because it's from Daisy's point of view.
But her whole monologue about what the cool girl is just amazing.
And I guess Panic Room is female centric too.
Jodie Foster.
Panic Room's a great film, actually. I often sort of forget about it, which is too bad because it's actually, I think, a really strong film.
Yeah, and it's basically Fincher being like, I want to make the perfect date night Saturday night movie to go popcorn movie to go watch in the theater.
And I'm a big defender of Alien 3. I know
Me
that
too.
so many people, speak badly of it, but I think I really like it.
I plan to give it a second viewing soon.
Watch the assembly cut.
Yes.
It's not a director's cut because Fincher disowns it, but I think despite all the problems and issues they had making that movie, it is as cohesive. It's surprising how cohesive that film is and how much it feels like a David Fincher movie, especially now that we know who David Fincher is as a director.
Yeah. I don't blame him for Alien 3 being, in my opinion, his weakest movie, just showing how he's improved.
Well, I mean, if you had to work under those circumstances, and part of that's just him being the perfectionist that he is that he didn't get to make the movie he wanted to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see him coming back to
Yeah, he'll never do a franchise.
No.
Even with Girl with the Dragon Tattoo was supposed to be, but again, I think it, reflected a lot of his, not having a lot of difficulty working under this, sort of that big Hollywood studio system.
Yeah.
Well, the movie did not make the kind of money they thought it was going to make, but they should have not released it at Christmas. And I don't think he will, even though he's been attached.
It sounded like he probably wanted awards out of it because of how successful Social Network was at the awards.
Well, and also they're Swedish films, right?
Yeah.
Those were really popular, and so were the books. So I think they thought they had a crossover hit on their hands because of how popular those were. But I guess people just didn't want another version. I mean, Rooney Mara got a Best Actress nomination for that.
Yeah.
I like his adaptation of it, but you're right. I mean, the other films had just come out, and Rumi Napace was, making a good name for herself, and she had already really identified with the character, so it kind of felt a bit superfluous, I think, maybe to redo it in sort of an American remake.
I recently watched Women Talking, and Rooney Mara is a good actress.
Yeah, that was a great film too.
Yeah.
One of the better movies that feels like it should be a play instead of a movie, but it plays really well still.
Right.
Yeah.
It definitely gave me 12 Angry Men and A Few Good Men vibes of how it was structured.
Yeah, Women Talking did remind me of 12 Angry Men a lot. In a good way.
Yeah. No, I was, it was interesting. I think it came out just a little too late. I think it might have gotten even more Oscar nominations if it had a little bit more time to be in the general zeitgeist before all the nominations started coming out and everything. But
well, they kept pushing the wide release date back further and further for whatever reason.
Seen it at a film festival in September. And so I had been sitting on it for a long time and really reflecting on it and thinking about it, but it still hadn't come out. And it kept it just felt like it was taking forever for it to actually get out there for people to see.
I also think it's weird that Ben Whishaw has the best performance in a film called Women Talking.
That was at the BAFTAs, right? I think that was that at the BAFTAs that the only nomination, or was it the Screen Actors Guild? It was one of the awards where the only actor nominated from Women Talking was Ben Whishaw, and it was a really bad. I mean, he's very good in the movie. I'll give him that, but it's kind of a bad look to only nominate the one male character.
Can't see it. I don't think it got nominated for BAFTAs.
Oh, maybe it wasn't BAFTAs. It felt like it was one of them that he got.
Well, it got a cast. I think it got a cast nomination for SAG. So maybe,
yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's how people are like, oh, it's still in the best picture race because it got the
Right.
cast nominee.
Yeah, and it got a Best Picture nomination, so it made it. It just didn't get Sarah Polley. Well, no, she got adapted screenplay though, which was great. I'm a huge Sarah Polley fan.
I think they should change the rules so it's one woman in Best Director.
Well, you know, in 2020 they nominated 2 women.
Yeah.
So problem solved, right?
Yeah, well, hopefully this year a woman will get a nomination.
I think there's a good
maybe.
chance. I think Greta Gerwig might be going for another Best Director nomination, and well deserved. I mean, what a you know what? I know people like Greta Gerwig as an actor, but for me, I like her way more as a director.
I prefer her as a director. When I was watching Frances Ha, I'm like, why didn't she direct this movie? This should have been her director.
Well, it's because her husband directed it, right? That's a Noah Baumbach film, right?
That's my hot take. I think she's a better director than Noah Baumbach.
Me too.
Noah Baumbach's last movie was a bit boring.
Right, and I think she's a better screenwriter. I think she's a better director. I like her I'm one of those people who thinks there hasn't been a bad Little Women film adaptation yet. They're all good in their own ways, but this new one, what she did with it, I think, really just.
So you like the Tarantino style?
Yeah, I like how she broke it up. I think it made you follow the characters in a different way than you sort of ever had in previous adaptations.
Well, and doesn't that show also it was an interesting choice, and I think it just shows off how what kind of range Florence Pugh has as an actor for her playing the character both as like a 10-year-old to a grown to like a 20-year-old.
Yeah. I also like the way that the ending is ambiguous as to whether or not that's what actually happened, or if because she talks about how the book publishers wanted her to give it a happy ending, give it a romantic ending, and so she does. And then you're like watching those scenes at the end, and they're kind of feeling like, this doesn't quite feel real. And I kind of like the idea that maybe Jo doesn't go off and get married, and instead she, gets to write books and not have to.
Maybe Fight Club's kind of started this trend of discussing toxic masculinity.
Right. Well, I mean, I think there's always been examinations. I think you're right about referencing films like Rebel Without a Cause. I've recently rewatched Some Like It Hot, which I think is actually quite subversive for its time as well, in terms of like exploring gender and queer issues and stuff. So Fight Club's not the one that invented it, but I definitely think it's a milestone along the way. And definitely my experience to tie this back into what we're here to discuss, my experience with Fight Club, especially as a queer man, is really to see it as a critique of, not just like sort of classic, like surface level toxic masculinity, but really bore down into how these struggles of masculinity and violence and tying those things together is damaging to men, to everyone. And I, as I watch it with that lens, it becomes even more meaningful and powerful for me. And especially if there are themes of self-loathe, like whether or not he's a closeted, I'm still debating for myself whether or not I think he's a closeted man with internalized homophobia or not, but I definitely think there's a case to be made there, and that can be a really powerful experience to sort of watch that self-destruction happen to him through that, and through his pursuing of sort of this violent toxic masculinity. But I'm also curious, like I think it's important for straight men to reflect on what this movie means for them watching this, as as we see this unreliable narrator and his self-destructive behavior, right?
Yes. I think it's a lot of those things. I think it's a critique on it. I think it pulls back and shows like the darker side of humanity and the frustrations. And maybe the homophobia is also because he has a little bit of queer tendencies, or he's attracted to some men in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot to unpack, and it's a lot to look at, and it's a little bit satirical too. And
Yep.
it's a complicated movie with complicated feelings. And as long as people who love this movie understand that, that's great. I just wish there wasn't this legion of bros who
Right.
love this movie and then don't understand or don't want to. They just take it at surface value, and it's like Tyler Durden is not a person you should want to be.
Right.
I'm glad that I've not ever experienced, because I would be saying to somebody, this is my favorite movie, you're kind of taking this the wrong way.
But I mean, this happens so much in pop culture with things that are critiquing things. You could say this about Breaking Bad. You could say this
Right.
about Rick and Morty. You could say this about V for Vendetta. You could say this about so many things in pop culture, that there's people who love these movies that misinterpret them.
Oh, I mean, we were talking about The Matrix earlier, and how the filmmakers have talked about them, sort of working through some of their, feelings around their gender identity and their, being a trans analogy. And so many of the fans of the movie, have, gloss over that or missed it or actually try to sort of see it differently.
Once I read it, I was like, oh yeah, the two pills.
Right.
Well, they really wanted this switch character to be two different genders. They wanted it to be one gender in the Matrix and another gender in reality.
Right.
That could have worked, but it probably would have confused people, so I can't see why they went with the same.
Well, that was a studio note, and I think that was their note, as they would confuse people.
Yeah.
I have a bit of a hot take around The Matrix in that I actually think the last movie, the new one, it might be the one I appreciate the most.
That's my second favorite Matrix film.
Partially because I think that, again, maybe she had just a better understanding of what she was trying to do at the time she made it, more than some of the earlier ones. And I think, I certainly think I appreciated a lot more about it than I did about the first ones. I think
Matrix Resurrection has better cinematography than the first remake.
Also, she got really meta with it, with the approach of how that movie was going to get made, because it was going to happen regardless if the Wachowskis were involved or not.
Yeah.
And she put that in the movie.
Yeah.
And she totally adverted probably what a lot of people wanted in a new Matrix movie.
Yeah.
I like that she just swung for the fences and been like, this is about love, guys. It's about love.
If you couldn't direct it, she should have gotten the director of V for Vendetta to direct it.
I'm glad that she did, though. I think that what she did with it was really great, and I'm glad that we got that movie the way that we did. And it certainly didn't get the reception anyone was expecting, because again, like a whole bunch of other movies that have revisited,
it properly kind of turned Jonathan Groff into a movie star.
I mean, maybe is he like? I don't know how much. Sometimes I wonder, some of the people, actors and directors and writers that I follow aren't ones that I realize. I think everybody knows them, and then I realize, mainstream people don't know who I'm talking about here.
I don't know if non-film, like film nerds or theater people know who Jonathan Groff is.
Like Hamilton, everyone who's a theater person knows him from Hamilton, right?
Yes.
He's got such a scene stealing moment in that play. But
but he's now famous because he was in The Matrix.
I see.
Well, I mean, he's also in Frozen and Glee, and he was just in Knock at the Cabin. I mean, he's making interesting choices as an actor as well.
Yeah. No, the man's got a good career.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you guys want to say about this movie?
I just appreciate being invited to talk about it because, again, it forced me to, not forced, but it sort of spurred me to rewatch it and, appreciate it again. And like I said, each time I get something different out of it and I understand it in a different way. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that.
Well, I'm glad you agreed to come on and talk with us, because when Robbie suggested this, I mean, I love this movie, but I've given Robbie I've kind of ribbed him a few times about this being one of his favorite movies, and I was like, I'm down to talk it because I love David Fincher. I love this movie, but I was like, we really need a non-straight white person perspective on this conversation, especially due to like what surrounds this movie, right? Like its fandom in a lot of ways. So I appreciate you coming on and talking with us just to get a different viewpoint on it.
Collin's the first Canadian to be on the show.
Oh, it's another new. That's awesome. That's a good. Makes me feel good. I feel honored to be your first Canuck on the show.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. It has for me as well.
Lovely, Anne. I'll have to get you on the Fleming Film Show.
I would love that.
Yes. Cody, I'm thinking for next month we'll have to do Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, okay. Yes.
I was thinking either that or The Exorcist.
Either one is great because those are two groundbreaking horror films, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm thinking about one of those.
Yeah, I'm down for either one of those.
Yes, because obviously Halloween, we need to discuss a horror movie. Yes, it's got to be done. I've been catching up with all the newer horror movies.
Well, as I said, there's a lot these days. It feels like horror seems to be a genre that's really exploding right now, and it's great. I mean, it's good. I don't know if you guys have seen Talk to Me, but I strongly recommend it. I think it's a real breakout.
Yeah, I'm gonna check it out as soon as I can because I hear it's really good.
I just watched The Pope's Exorcist.
Yeah, so did I. I can't say I was a big fan.
Russell Crowe was the best thing about the movie.
Yeah, and that's not saying a lot. I mean, whenever a genre, is exploding and a lot of going on, there's the good and the bad with that, right? Like there's things that are great and there's things that are, not so great.
But I finally watched Pell for the first time and I loved it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, with Silence of the Lambs and The Exorcist, I mean, Silence of the Lambs is another one that is a film I love, but is also a film that, somewhat has some problematic elements around moral transness specifically that I think are interesting to talk about for sure. But also just an amazing film overall too. Like, incredible the way that film was made.
Yes.
Well, and I think it's incredible because, Jonathan Demme didn't mean to do the things that this film gets accused of. And it was a trend in Hollywood for a long time, though. And so his immediate reaction after that...
Want to start that trend.
Did what?
Psycho.
Yeah, I think it did. But him making Philadelphia immediately after Silence of the Lambs as a response to the reaction was that just shows you what kind of a nice guy he was in real life.
And Philadelphia is a film that surprisingly holds up. I rewatched it recently and went in a little bit nervous about how it was going to be, but surprisingly held up really well. And some of the stuff it was making, I think, was actually pretty groundbreaking for the time.
Philadelphia is a film that got me more into these films that tackle these social issues.
But no, I think you're right. Like he reacted. There's a lot to talk about with Silence of the Lambs, but again, fascinating discussion it'll be for sure. Yeah. There's a lot of great things to talk about there. And I mean, you're right about Psycho. I think it goes back in for this like stuff in Hitchcock. There's Rebecca. There's so much that's sort of. Anyways, so much to talk about. That's what's great about talking about movies is you can go on forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right, I'm going to leave it there, lads, if that's all good. Colin, thank you for coming on, and Cody, thank you for doing this with me again this month.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've not done a video in a while because Justin's been busy, but it's nice to do a big video with you guys.
Yeah, it's great
Always
to
a
see you.
pleasure. Always a pleasure to come on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you're watching this later on, give us a like, subscribe to me to hear all the Fleming film news, and comment us down below what your thoughts on Fight Club are. I mean, we all give this a 5-star rating, don't we?
Yes. Or I do.
Yeah.
Sweet. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, lads, and thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you very soon.
Bye.
Bye.